was a person that everyone thought was crazy, but they ended up being right.
Reddit Goose!
Christine Collins, famously portrayed by Angelina Jolie in the movie Changeling. After her son was abducted, the police found him months later and reunited them. But Christine was adamant that it wasn't her son Walter and was an imposter. Even though she had evidence to prove it, she was temporarily committed by the officer in charge of the case, and even after the kid admitted he lied and wasn't Walter, it still took over a week to release Christine.
Some of the elderly patients with dementia in a home in my city kept complaining they weren't given food. Everyone thought they must have forgotten that they'd already eaten, as people with dementia sometimes do. Nope. Turns out some pieces of shit nursing staff didn't always give everyone their meals, amongst other abuse.
Ludwig Boltzmann. His equations and formulas explained the physical properties of matter, but as it went against the then accepted laws of physics, he was ridiculed and ignored for years while fighting for atom theory to be accepted. He took his own life just 3 years before Ernest Rutherford discovered the nucleus of an atom, proving Boltzmann's theory.
The introduction to the classic textbook on statistical mechanics humorously begins. Ludwig Boltzmann, who spent much of his life studying statistical mechanics, died in 1906 by his own hand. Paul Ehrenfest, carrying on the work, died similarly in 1933. Now it is our turn to study statistical mechanics.
Ignaz Semmelweis. In 1846, Semmelweis proposed the idea that hand washing could prevent the spread of disease in hospitals. He was ridiculed during his time, sent to a mental asylum, and died forgotten by his peers.
Died of a staph infection, which might have been prevented with proper hand washing.
Kotaku Wamura. He was the longtime mayor of the Japanese town of Fudei. While mayor, he learned that the town had been devastated in the past by tsunamis. He literally saw the bodies from one of the disasters and ordered the construction of an enormous seawall. While other towns in the area also had seawalls, this thing was considered insanely high overkill. The project was hideously expensive and he was relentlessly mocked. He died in 1997. In 2011, a tsunami struck Japan, killing about 20,000 people. The seawall worked as planned, protecting Fudei, and the town escaped almost untouched. Barry James Marshall was one of the scientists who discovered that the bacteria H. pylori causes stomach ulcers. However, getting people to believe it was difficult. It was thought that lifestyle and excessive stomach acid were the main factor that lead to ulcers, so when he suggested that a bacterial infection could cause it, no one believed him. In response, he infected himself with H. pylori by drinking cultures, which in turn gave himself stomach ulcers and then treated the infection. He and Robin Warren received a Nobel Prize for this discovery.
Marshall McLuhan. His theories on how media usage changes how we think and interact with each other were prophetic. He predicted the internet and how a worldwide instant form of communication would create tribes of people centered around their own echo chambers. He also wrote about how using media changes how we think and process information. Considered a crazy pop culture media and literature speculator in the 60s, now his ideas have been pretty much confirmed by modern neuroscience and communication study. Sadly, he died before the internet happened. It would have been incredible to see his stories on social media.
Lieutenant David Steves. On May 9, 1957, he was on a mission to fly a new training jet, a Lockheed T-33, from Hamilton Air Force Base in Novato, California, to Craig AFB in Alabama. The plane was lost from radar, and the Air Force couldn't find the missing plane or pilot. The military declared Steves dead, and that was that. Until, that is, 54 days later when Steves emerged from the Sierra, having been found badly malnourished and still limping badly on swollen ankles. His story is heartbreaking. Accused of selling the plane to the Russians because they couldn't find the wreckage. Poor guy. He died before they finally found the evidence that his story was true all along.
The many British postal workers fired and prosecuted for stealing. Many were lifelong employees. Some committed suicide. This went on for almost 2 decades. Spoiler, It was a surveillance software glitch that went ignored for years. They were all innocent. Edit. Surveillance software was hyperbole on my part and incorrect. I honestly forgot exactly what the software's purpose was, only that it was buggy AAF and incorrectly flagged employees or employee activity in a way that made it look like they were stealing.
My grandma, she insisted people kept stealing her newspaper and specifically said it was someone in a white van. Grandma was always a little off, so we just thought she was paranoid and had a bad delivery person. Until one day, my mom and I are driving past her house and a white van in front of us stopped, stole my grandma's newspaper, and drove off. Grandma wasn't crazy after all, at least not about that.
Sister Kenny and her physical therapy for polio victims. The treatment at the time was to lock up the affected limbs in braces or casts, leaving the patient crippled for life. Her idea of using hot compresses and gently moving the limbs took a very long time to be accepted by the medical establishment, as she was a woman and just a nurse.
Harry Marco Polo spent 10 years trying to convince everyone, investors, journalists, regulatory agencies, etc., that Bernie Madoff was a fraud based on forensic accounting. Madoff was one of the most respected names on Wall Street, and despite the overwhelming evidence, no one was willing to entertain the thought he might be running a Ponzi scheme. Harry's book, No One Would Listen, is a pretty great account of financial detective work and just the abject frustration of being absolutely certain you're right, but no one believes you.
In the days of landlines, my phone was tapped. I could hear a strange hollow sound and I knew someone was listening. I had had a bad accident and was home for almost a year and involved in a lawsuit. I told my attorney about it. He told me the insurance company wouldn't bother. I mentioned it to my roommate. She told me I was crazy. I began to notice a van parked on my street. It was there for several days. I thought I was under surveillance. My attorney and my roommate said I was crazy. A person came to my door asking questions about the neighborhood. They claimed to be from a real estate company. They didn't go to other houses. I thought I was being watched. My attorney and my roommate said I was crazy. Several weeks later, my roommate's boyfriend was arrested for stealing physical and intellectual property from IBM. It was the beginning of the tech era and he stole millions in hardware and software and ideas. We were being watched to see if we were involved. The phone was tapped. We were under surveillance. We were taped. I wasn't crazy after all.
Courtney Love was warning everyone about Harvey Weinstein back in the mid-90s, but everyone just wrote her off. If you're a woman in this industry and Weinstein invites you to one of his parties, don't go.
If Courtney Love, of all people, tells you not to go to a party, you should really not go to that party.
Michael Berry, the first guy to predict the 2008 housing market crash. He was a hedge fund manager for Scion Capital at the time and basically bet his entire fund's liquidity, all the money the fund had, that there would be a crash. No one believed him except a few other people who also bet against the market. Several of his clients sued him for tying their money up in what they considered to be a foolish bet, all to have him be right in the end. He made his fund something like $1.3 billion and the value increased about 489%. The movie The Big Short is about him and the few other people who were wise enough to bet against the market at the time. I watched the movie like 5 times in order to try to understand exactly what happened, but still don't fully get it. Fun fact: Michael Berry was also ahead of the curve in the recent GameStop surge. I think he had something like 1.2 million shares of GameStop months before the price shot up. Might need to fact-check myself.
Me. About my, now disowned, cousin. He kept stealing things from me, which my family felt was no big deal. But it escalated. It went from stealing candy, to my things, to cash. And after that I asked them how much longer they would support him and call me selfish for not sharing. The line was finally crossed when he stole our grandmother's credit cards and her car. She finally wrote him off. This was after he had stolen all of her jewelry, including the last present anniversary ring my grandfather was ever to give her. Oh, but he tried to say that our family kicked him out because he's gay. No, none of us cared about that. It was because he's a thief. His friends have bailed him out of jail and then dropped him when he steals from them, but he claims the world is just unfair to him. Now he tells his pity story and milks the "my family disowned me" because I'm gay to everyone he begs from. I learned this when he tried to do it to one of my friends.
Thank you for watching the video to the end. I will be glad to like and subscribe. Tell me, have there been any stories with you when everyone thought that you were wrong, but it wasn't so? Share it in the comments. See you in the next video.